Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I welcome to my studio my colleague, Steve Moore of the Heritage Foundation. He just ducked in from a conversation with a leading presidential candidate, that would be Governor Bush, and we're going to speak of that momentarily because we're joined by my co-host, my colleague and friend, and Mr. Moore's partner in a conversation with Governor Bush, Larry Kudlow. And the first thing we must attend to is Larry, some days ago, I believe a week plus, remarked on his radio show that if Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut made a poor decision about the Iran deal, the suspect's secret nuclear weapons program, the Vienna Accords, and that poor decision was in support of a deal that turns $150 billion into the hands of a regime that kills Americans, that kills our allies, that threatens Israel, and that is a predator regime. If Senator Blumenthal supports that deal, then Larry Kudlow is going to make a decision about the Senate race in Connecticut. A very good evening to you, Mr. Kudlow. You see Mr. Blumenthal's statement. What did you make of it, and how do you respond, Larry? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. I thought his vote was stunning, but even worse was the statements accompanying it. I mean, I want to contrast what I call statesmen, all right, Democrats crossing the line with really good positions, namely Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Robert Menendez, and Senator Ben Cardin, each one of them. And I might add former Democratic Senator Joe Lieberman has done just so well. Here's Blumenthal really just being a party line hack, and he even said in his note that he wouldn't have made this agreement in the first place. He wouldn't have accepted this. So my question is, why'd you vote for it? I mean, look, on the nuclear side, as you know very well, John, not only are their programs extended, but you've got these 24-day periods to challenge military installations that may be starting nukes we didn't know about. You've actually got a section in there where the Iranians, in a deal with the UN Atomic Energy Commission, will self-police themselves.
That's right.
I mean, it's extraordinary that anybody could swallow this, because Iran, to put it bluntly, General Keane was on my radio show, they're liars. They're liars. Now, the other point, which I have harped on, is the sanctions are being lifted, so we're talking about $100 to $150 billion getting to Iran, going to the Quds, going to the Revolutionary Guards, going to General Soleimani, to allow Iran to continue to expand its state sponsorship of terrorism and what amounts to an Iranian empire in the Middle East. And along the way, they will kill more American soldiers, which they have been killing, regrettably, tragically, for years now. Years. That's what they're going to do. We're giving them money to finance their terrorism, and it will wind up killing Americans and our allies in the Middle East. John, that's unacceptable, and I've never run for office before. I'm not a politician. I never even ran for class president before. Citizens have to stand up and fight this, okay? They have to have a citizens movement, and that's what this is about. Senators and House members who vote for this treaty or deal must face opposition at the polls. That's the way Americans express their dissatisfaction.
Steve, it begins to sound as if we're talking to Larry Kudlow, a Senate candidate. How did you hear it, Steve?
Well, I think that drum beat you're hearing today, Larry, is the sound of the Kudlow for Senate movement.
Yes.
And look, I think that, first of all, I've known Larry for 25 years. I consider him one of my dearest friends, a brother. But, Larry, you are a special talent. I think, above the fact that you would be the voice for growth in the United States Senate, which is sadly lacking. I see an imperative here because, John, I think this becomes a referendum, this election, on this Iran deal. And that's why, Larry, I think you have to run. If you do, I'll be beside you. You're going to have hundreds of thousands of supporters around the country if you do it.
In addition, lots of supporters in Connecticut, Larry. Mr. Blumenthal has not distinguished himself as a senator these last years.
Well, look, I love Steve Moore, and he's my brother, and I appreciate all this. I'm edging closer to a decision. I'm edging closer to a run. There's no announcement today, but
damn.
On the other hand, keep in mind, keep our perspective here. Connecticut is a deep blue state.
Yes.
Blumenthal has been on various statewide ballots in Connecticut for, I don't know, the better part of 3 decades.
He's a career Connecticut politician.
Right. And, he's a left liberal. I mean, he's not just left of center. He's a left liberal. And, as Steve mentioned, my principal issues are not foreign policy issues, although I'm furious at this Iranian deal. I mean, I'm a guy who wants supply-side flat tax rates, deregulation, and a sound dollar. Connecticut, as a state, has been ruined by Blumenthal and Governor Malloy.
Yep.
Ruined. And companies are leaving and individuals are leaving. So if I made this race, I would talk a lot about taxes and regulations inside Connecticut and nationwide, because they're very linked. In fact, Steve Moore has authored books about state tax burdens and their economies. So it would be a broader effort. But again, no announcement right now. It's a tough race. We have to keep our perspective. It's a deep blue state. But
it's a deep blue state, Larry, as you know, that's going down the tubes. It's going the way of my home state of Illinois. I mean, it's states like New York and Connecticut and Illinois and New Jersey. I mean, remember, people used to move to Connecticut to lower their taxes.
Oh, Lucy and Desi Arnaz moved to Connecticut.
Exactly. Now people move to New York to go escape the high taxes in Connecticut. I mean,
I will tell you this: there's so much unrest in Connecticut because of Governor Malloy's tax hikes. He raised taxes 4 years ago. Then he ran for re-election, said he wouldn't, but he raised them again. Blumenthal never uttered a peep of dissent. It turns out in polling that's been done, the number one issue in the state of Connecticut is, in fact, taxes.
Wow.
That's very rare. If you go around the country and poll, you'll find things like the economy and jobs, but you'll find taxes rather down the list. In Connecticut, it's the number one issue.
Wow.
As you noted, in Illinois, so Illinois got itself a Republican governor. Maryland got itself a Republican governor. Massachusetts got itself a Republican governor. So miracles are possible even in the Northeast.
Let's talk just a moment, because we're going to speak of Governor Bush and his tax plan in a moment. The jobs report last Friday looked dreadful, and I liked the headline in the Wall Street Journal, "What's Not to Hate?" It was an underperforming 173,000 jobs added. However, I always read the economist's remarks because they come up with clever metaphors. And I ask you, Larry, what is a growth slowdown? That's a quote from the Wall Street Journal.
Well, a growth slowdown is a growth slowdown. What they're really referring to, jobs have been rising, but they're saying that the growth of jobs is slowing down. That actually is not precisely true. The bigger point is that the Federal Reserve and a whole lot of Wall Street economists were expecting a very sizable economic growth snapback in the second half, 3.5% kind of snapback. I don't see it. This jobs report, by the way, 140,000 private sector jobs. That's the lowest in 5 months. So I'd be careful. Commodity price indexes are slipping, and inflation expectations are falling. I frankly would prefer the Fed not raise their rate, and if they did, it could be 1/8 of a point. And as far as the economy goes, I don't know what Steve thinks. I think we're still locked in this 2.5% zone.
Steve, this can't be good for Connecticut. Let's be focused here. That jobs report doesn't point to blue states growing in any positive fashion because of all the inhibitions they have, but also there's a national slowdown, growth slowdown.
Yeah, well, look, policy matters, and we see that at the state level where the red states, especially the lowest tax states like Tennessee and Texas and Florida and Nevada, have been creating jobs at about twice the pace of blue states like my state of Illinois and Larry's state of Connecticut and your state of New York. So there is a lot of evidence that policy matters by looking at the states. I agree with Larry. I think we just stuck with this 2% run. And I think for most American workers, what they're concerned about is not so. By the way, one other quick point. Anyone in this country who believes the unemployment rate is 5.1% is smoking some of that marijuana in Colorado. I mean, we're closer to 10% when you include people who've dropped out of the workforce, people who can't find a full-time job, and people laugh at the idea that we have a 5.1% unemployment rate.
Steve Moore of the Heritage Foundation here with me in studio. Larry Kudlow of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. And the state of Connecticut hasn't made a decision looking to the Senate race against Senator Blumenthal. Kudlow. I'm John Batchelor.